The diner was warm and smelled of fried onions, coffee, and something sweet baking in the back. It wasn't much to look at, just a small family-owned place with faded red booths, cracked vinyl seats, and a counter that had seen better days. But Joe's diner was always busy. People came for the cheap food, friendly service, and the feeling that they were stepping into a simpler time, even if only for an hour or two. Michelle Carter moved quickly between the tables, balancing plates of burgers and fries on one arm while jotting down orders with her free hand. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and she wore the same uniform she'd been wearing for years. Black slacks, a white button-up shirt, and a name tag that read, Michelle, in bold letters. She didn't mind the long hours, or the endless stream of customers. Work kept her mind off things. Things like the fact that she'd lost both her parents in a car accident 3 years ago and was now raising her younger brother, Jamal, all by herself. Jamal was only 15, smart as a whip, but still too young to fully understand how hard life could be. Michelle worked 2 jobs, so he wouldn't have to worry about money or give up his dream of becoming an engineer. Sometimes, late at night when she was alone, she wondered if she'd ever get to live for herself again. But those thoughts never lasted long. There was too much to do, too many people depending on her. It was almost 9 o'clock on a chilly autumn evening, and the dinner rush was finally slowing down. Most of the customers had left, leaving behind crumpled napkins and half-empty soda glasses. The only ones still there were a couple sitting in the corner booth whispering quietly, and a man at the counter nursing a cup of coffee. Michelle cleared, away plates and wiped down tables, humming softly to herself as she worked. That's when she noticed him. He stood just inside the doorway, hesitating as though unsure whether he should come in or turn around and leave. He was older, probably in his late 60s or early 70s, with a scruffy gray beard and thinning hair. His clothes were worn and patched in places, and his shoes looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. A backpack hung loosely from one shoulder and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the strap. Michelle stopped what she was doing and studied him for a moment. Homeless, she thought, or close to it. She'd seen plenty of people like him before, especially in this part of town. Some came into the diner hoping for a free meal. Others just wanted somewhere warm to sit for a few minutes. Either way, she knew the drill. If the manager caught wind of someone who couldn't pay, they'd be out the door faster than you could say Joe's diner. But there was something about this man that made her pause. Maybe it was the way he looked around the room, not with desperation but with a kind of quiet dignity, as if he didn't want to impose. Or maybe it was the tiredness in his eyes, the kind that came from years of carrying burdens no one else could see. Whatever it was, Michelle felt a pang of sympathy, deep in her chest. She walked over to him, forcing a smile onto her face. "Hey there," she said gently. "Can I help you?" The man blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. I was wondering if I could sit for a bit, just for a little while." "Of course," Michelle replied. "Take a seat wherever you like. I'll bring you a menu." He hesitated again, glancing toward the counter where the manager, Greg, was chatting with the cook. "Are you sure? I don't want to cause any trouble." "No trouble at all," Michelle assured him. "Just grab a booth and I'll be right over." Reluctantly, the man shuffled over to an empty booth near the window. He sat down carefully, placing his backpack on the seat beside him. Michelle grabbed a menu and headed over, sliding it across the table with a smile. "Here you go. Can I start you off with a drink?" "Water's fine," he murmured, avoiding her gaze. "Thank you." Michelle nodded and went to fetch the water. As she poured it, she glanced back at the man. He hadn't touched the menu yet, just stared at it, as if reading the words required more energy than he had. Something about him tugged at her heartstrings, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. When she returned with the glass, she asked, "Do you know what you'd like to order?" He hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "I'm not really hungry," he admitted after a moment. "But, well, I guess I could use something to eat." Michelle frowned slightly. She'd heard this tone before, the careful phrasing, the reluctance to admit weakness. "How about the chicken sandwich?" she suggested brightly. "It's one of our best sellers." "That sounds good," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "If it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Michelle assured him. She scribbled the order on her notepad and turned to head toward the kitchen, but something stopped her. Turning back, she added, "And maybe some soup too. It's getting cold out there." For the first time, the man met her eyes. There was a flicker of gratitude in his expression, fleeting but unmistakable. "You're very kind," he said softly. "Thank you." Michelle smiled and hurried off to place the order. As she passed Greg, she paused, lowering her voice. "Hey Greg, can we comp the soup for table 7? I think he's having a rough night." Greg raised an eyebrow but shrugged. "Sure, whatever. Just don't make a habit of it." "Thanks," Michelle said, relieved. She knew Greg wasn't the most generous boss, but he usually let her slide when it came to stuff like this. A few minutes later, she brought the man his food. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it might be his last. Michelle checked on him occasionally, refilling his water glass and making small talk whenever she could. He introduced himself as Walter and told her he used to work as a mechanic before arthritis forced him into retirement. Now, he mostly traveled from town to town, looking for odd jobs and trying to stay out of trouble. As Walter finished his meal, one of the remaining customers, a loud, boisterous guy in his 30s, spotted him and sneered. "Hey, buddy," the man called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "You planning to pay for that, or are you going to stiff them like you probably stiff everyone else?" Walter froze, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. The diner fell silent, all eyes turning toward the confrontation. Michelle felt a surge of anger but kept her expression neutral as she approached the rude customer. "Is there a problem here?" she asked coolly. The man smirked. "Yeah, actually. I don't think this guy has enough cash to cover his tab. Maybe you should check his pockets before he skips out on the bill." Michelle clenched her jaw but forced herself to stay calm. "Don't worry about it," she said firmly. "I've got it covered." "You serious?" the man scoffed. "You're paying for him? What is he, your charity case?" Before Michelle could respond, Walter spoke up, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I appreciate your concern," he said, addressing the rude customer. "But I assure you I have every intention of paying my way." The man laughed derisively. "Yeah, right. Like you've got 2 cents to rub together." Michelle stepped between them, her patience wearing thin. "That's enough," she snapped. "If you've got a problem with how we run things here, maybe you should take your business elsewhere." The man held up his hands in mock surrender. Fine. Don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he threw a few bills on the counter and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence lingered for a moment before Michelle turned back to Walter. "I'm sorry about that," she said sincerely. "Some people just don't know when to keep their mouth shut." Walter shook his head. "No need to apologize. You didn't deserve to be treated that way because of me." "It's not your fault," Michelle insisted. "Look, let me handle the check. Consider it, I don't know, a thank you for being such a polite customer." Walter studied her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and something else, something Michelle couldn't quite place. Finally, he nodded. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've done something extraordinary tonight." Michelle shrugged, brushing off the compliment. "Just doing my job." But as Walter gathered his belongings and prepared to leave, he paused at the door and turned back to her. "You may not realize it now," he said, his voice low but intense. "But what you've done tonight will change everything." And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the night as suddenly as he'd arrived. Michelle watched him go, puzzled by his words but too exhausted to dwell on them. She cleaned up the rest of the diner, closed up shop, and headed home, unaware that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. The next morning, Michelle woke up feeling groggy and tired. The late shift at the diner always left her drained, but last night had been different. Walter's words kept replaying in her mind. "What you've done tonight will change everything." She shook her head as she got ready for work, brushing it off as nonsense. People said strange things all the time, especially when they were under stress or just grateful for a small act of kindness. Still, something about the way he'd looked at her, that intense, almost knowing expression, stuck with her. By the time she arrived at Joe's diner, the lunch rush was already starting to pick up. Greg greeted her with his usual gruffness, handing her a stack of menus and telling her to get moving. Michelle nodded and slipped into her routine, taking orders, delivering food, and chatting with regulars. It wasn't until her break that she finally had a moment to herself. She stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, pulling her jacket tighter around her as she leaned against the brick wall of the diner. The street was busy, filled with people, hurrying to their destinations, oblivious to her presence. As she sipped her coffee, her thoughts drifted back to Walter. What had he meant by change everything? And why had he sounded so serious? Just then, a crumpled piece of paper fell out of her pocket. Startled, Michelle picked it up and unfolded it. She didn't remember putting anything in her pocket last night, but there it was, a note written in shaky handwriting. The message was short but cryptic. Your compassion opens doors others cannot see. Find me tomorrow under the clock tower. Michelle stared at the note, her heart pounding. Had Walter slipped this into her hand before leaving? If so, why hadn't she noticed? She read the words again, trying to make sense of them. What kind of doors was he talking about? And what did he mean by under the clock tower? There was only one clock tower in the area, an old ornate structure in the middle of the park downtown. It was a popular spot for tourists and locals alike, but Michelle couldn't imagine why Walter would want to meet her there. For a moment, she considered throwing the note away. Maybe it was some kind of prank or a harmless eccentricity on Walter's part. But curiosity got the better of her. Something about the note, and about Walter himself, felt important, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. She decided to go to the clock tower during her lunch break the next day, if only to satisfy her curiosity. The following afternoon, Michelle found herself standing beneath the towering clock, its hands ticking steadily despite the chaos of the city around it. She glanced at her watch. It was almost noon, the time she'd assumed Walter meant. A light breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, and the faint smell of roasted peanuts wafted through the air from a nearby vendor. For a while, nothing happened. Michelle began to feel silly, wondering if she'd misinterpreted the note or if Walter had forgotten all about it. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted him. Walter approached slowly, his steps deliberate but steady. He wore the same tattered clothes as before, though he seemed less haggard today, as if carrying some newfound purpose. When he reached her, he smiled faintly. I wasn't sure you'd come, he admitted. Michelle crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. You left me a pretty mysterious note. How could I not? Walter chuckled softly. Fair enough. Let's sit down. There's much to discuss. They walked over to a nearby bench and sat side by side, the noise of the city fading into the background. Walter turned to face her, his expression growing serious. Michelle, what I'm about to tell you may sound unbelievable, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. Depends on what you're going to say. Walter took a deep breath. Do you believe in other dimensions? Parallel worlds where things are similar yet different? Michelle blinked. Not really. That sounds more like science fiction than reality. Perhaps, Walter conceded. But let me explain. Years ago, I worked on a top-secret government project. We called it the Harmonic Resonator. Its purpose was to explore alternate dimensions, worlds beyond our own. At first, we thought we were simply advancing scientific knowledge, but we soon discovered something extraordinary. What? Michelle asked, her skepticism giving way to intrigue. We weren't alone, Walter continued. In these other dimensions, there were beings watching us, observing humanity. They aren't human, not in the way we understand, but they have a vested interest in us, particularly in our emotions. compassion, kindness, selflessness. These resonate across dimensions in ways we can barely comprehend. Michelle frowned, struggling to process what he was saying. So you're telling me there are aliens or something spying on us because of how we feel? In a manner of speaking, yes, Walter replied. We call them watchers. They aren't malevolent, at least not intentionally, but their presence is significant. And certain actions, like yours last night, create ripples that draw their attention. Michelle leaned back, crossing her arms. Okay, I'll bite. Why would covering a meal for a stranger catch their interest? It's not just about the meal, Walter explained. It's the intent behind it. In a world often driven by selfishness and greed, genuine acts of kindness stand out. They disrupt patterns, challenge expectations. Last night, your compassion opened a kind of doorway, a connection between our world and theirs. Michelle shook her head, trying to wrap her mind around it. This is insane. You're saying I somehow made contact with whatever these watchers are? Not directly, Walter clarified, but you triggered a chain reaction. The watchers are aware of you now, and they may choose to interact with you. Why should I care? Michelle asked bluntly. I've got enough problems without worrying about interdimensional beings. Walter sighed. Because once they take notice, ignoring them isn't an option. Trust me, Michelle. I've seen what happens when people try to run from this. The best thing you can do is prepare yourself. Learn what they want and decide how you'll respond. Michelle stared at him, torn between disbelief and fascination. On one hand, this whole conversation felt absurd, like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. On the other hand, Walter seemed completely sincere. His tone was calm, his eyes steady, as if he truly believed every word he was saying. So what am I supposed to do? She asked finally. Wait around for these watchers to show up and give me instructions? Not exactly, Walter said. But if and when they appear, you'll need to be ready. They might offer you choices, opportunities to help bridge the gap between our worlds. Whether you accept those opportunities is up to you. Michelle rubbed her temples, overwhelmed. This is a lot to take in. I know, Walter said gently. And I wouldn't burden you with it if I didn't think you were capable of handling it. Your act of kindness last night wasn't random, Michelle. It was meaningful. To them, and to me. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity. Whatever Walter believed, he genuinely thought. Michelle had a role to play in something far bigger than either of them. All right, she said after a long pause. Let's say I believe you. What happens next? Walter smiled faintly. That depends on you. For now, keep living your life. As normal. Be observant. If anything unusual occurs, don't panic. And remember, you're not alone in this. I'll help you navigate whatever comes your way. Michelle nodded slowly, still uncertain but willing to hear him out. As they parted ways, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. Back at the diner, she tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Walter's words. Were there really other dimensions? Was she being watched by unseen forces? Or was this all just a bizarre coincidence? One thing was certain. Michelle Carter's ordinary existence had taken a sharp turn toward the extraordinary. Over the next few days, Michelle tried to go about her life as if nothing unusual had happened. She worked her shifts at Joe's diner, helped Jamal with his homework, and did her best to push thoughts of Walter and his strange story out of her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It started with little things. A customer would thank her for her service, and their words would seem unusually heartfelt, almost too sincere. Or she'd catch glimpses of shadows moving in the corners of her vision, only to turn and find nothing there. At first, she told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. After all, working long hours and dealing with stress could make anyone jumpy. But the more it happened, the harder it became to ignore. One evening, after closing up the diner, Michelle decided to take a walk to clear her head. The streets were quiet, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional passing car. As she strolled through the park near the clock tower, she noticed a faint buzzing sound, like electricity crackling in the air. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent, growing stronger the closer she got to the clock tower itself. When she reached the base of the structure, the buzzing stopped abruptly. For a moment, everything was still, too still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the world around her shifted. The colors of the trees and buildings blurred together, melting into shades of gray and silver. Shadows, stretched unnaturally, twisting into shapes that shouldn't exist. Michelle froze, her heart pounding as she realized she wasn't alone. Standing before her was a figure, or rather what looked like a figure. It was tall and humanoid, but its features were indistinct, as if it existed halfway between being solid and transparent. Its eyes glowed faintly, casting an eerie light that made Michelle's skin crawl. She wanted to run, to scream, but her body refused to obey. All she could do was stand there, paralyzed by fear. The creature tilted its head, studying her with an expressionless face. Though it didn't speak aloud, Michelle heard a voice inside her mind, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through every cell in her body. "You have been chosen." Michelle's breath caught in her throat. "Chosen? For what?" she managed to whisper, though her voice trembled. "To serve as a bridge," the voice replied. "Between worlds unseen?" "A bridge?" Michelle repeated, shaking her head in disbelief. "I don't understand. Why me?" The creature didn't answer immediately. Instead, it extended a hand, or what passed for a hand, and gestured toward the space around them. Suddenly, images flickered in front of Michelle's eyes. Scenes of people helping each other. Moments of kindness and compassion captured in vivid detail. She saw herself covering Walter's meal, smiling warmly as she handed him the plate. She saw strangers offering assistance to those in need, friends comforting one another during tough times, even small acts of generosity that might otherwise go unnoticed. "These actions ripple across dimensions," the voice explained. "They draw our attention. Your act of kindness opened a doorway, one we wish to explore further." Michelle swallowed hard, trying to process what she was hearing. "So you're saying I'm special because I bought someone dinner?" "Not merely bought," the voice corrected. "Your intent matters most. Compassion is rare among your kind. It creates connections we cannot forge ourselves." "But why now?" Michelle asked. "Why does any of this matter?" "Because balance is fragile," the creature said. "There are forces beyond your understanding that threaten harmony across realms. You may help prevent such chaos, or worsen it. The choice is yours." Before Michelle could respond, the Ake vision faded and the world snapped back to normal. The colors returned, the shadows retreated, and the buzzing sound vanished entirely. She found herself standing alone beneath the clock tower, her knees weak and her hands trembling. Had it really happened, or had she imagined it all? The next day, Michelle met Walter again, this time at a quiet cafe a few blocks from the diner. She arrived early, her mind racing with questions. When Walter finally showed up, he took one, looked at her pale face and knew something was wrong. "They contacted you, didn't they?" he asked quietly. Michelle nodded, still shaken. "How did you know?" "It happens quickly once they take notice," Walter replied. "Tell me everything." She recounted the encounter in detail, describing the glowing eyes, the voice in her head, and the visions of kindness rippling across dimensions. Walter listened intently, nodding occasionally but not interrupting until she finished. "You handled it well," he said when she was done. "Most people panic the first time." "Are you serious?" Michelle exclaimed. "What else am I supposed to do when some shadow monster shows up and tells me I'm part of some cosmic plan?" Walter chuckled softly. "Shadow monster? Isn't far off, honestly. But yes, it's overwhelming. That's why I'm here, to guide you." "Guide me how?" Michelle demanded. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" "For starters," Walter began, "you need to understand their perspective. These beings, they call themselves Watchers, are neither good nor evil. They observe humanity to learn, not to interfere. However, certain events, like your act of kindness, create disturbances that force them to act. So they're watching us? Michelle asked. Like scientists studying lab rats? In a way, Walter admitted. But it's more complex than that. Humanity fascinates them because of our capacity for emotion. Love, hate, joy, sorrow. All these shape your reality in ways they can't fully comprehend. And when someone like you performs an act of selflessness, it sends shockwaves through multiple dimensions. Michelle sighed, rubbing her temples. This is insane. I'm just a waitress, Walter. How am I supposed to deal with whatever this is? You're more than that, Walter said firmly. You've already proven yourself capable of extraordinary things. Now it's time to embrace your potential. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. The Watchers will likely assign tasks to you, small missions designed to test your resolve. Some will involve observing human behavior. Others may require direct intervention. Each task will teach you something new about yourself and the worlds beyond ours. And if I say no? Michelle asked. If I refuse to play along? Walter hesitated, his expression darkening. Refusal comes with risks. Ignoring their presence won't make them disappear. In fact, it could attract unwanted attention from less benevolent forces. Michelle frowned, her stomach sinking. So I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Walter corrected. But the consequences depend on which path you take. Trust me, Michelle. The rewards outweigh the dangers. She stared at him, weighing her options. On one hand, this whole situation sounded absurd, like something out of a sci-fi novel. On the other hand, she couldn't deny what she'd experienced the night before. Whether she liked it or not, her life had changed. All right, she said finally. Let's say I agree to this. What happens next? Walter smiled faintly. Training. You'll need to learn how to harness the abilities, awakening within you. Abilities sparked by your encounter with the Watchers. What kind of abilities? Michelle asked warily. Time manipulation, for one, Walter explained. Brief glimpses of possible futures, healing minor injuries, enhanced perception. But using them comes at a cost, physical and emotional exhaustion. Michelle groaned, burying her face in her hands. This keeps getting better and better. It's not easy, Walter admitted. But you're stronger than you think. And I'll be here to help every step of the way. As they parted ways later that afternoon, Michelle felt a mix of dread and determination. Her ordinary life was slipping further away with each passing day, replaced by something far stranger and more complicated. Yet deep down, she couldn't deny the spark of excitement burning within her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't face it alone. Michelle's life began to shift in ways she never could have imagined. At first, the changes were subtle, small moments that felt slightly off, like déjà vu or an inexplicable sense of knowing what someone was about to say. But as the days turned into weeks, those moments grew more frequent and intense. It wasn't long before Michelle realized that Walter had been right. Her encounter with the Watchers had awakened something inside her, something powerful and unfamiliar. Walter became her guide, meeting her whenever she had free time to teach her how to control her newfound abilities. They practiced in quiet places, a park after sunset, an empty warehouse on the outskirts of town, even the back alley behind Joe's diner late at night when no one else was around. Walter explained that her powers stemmed from the connection she'd formed with the Watchers, a bond forged by her act of kindness. The more she embraced it, the stronger her abilities would become. The first skill Michelle learned was how to slow down time. Walter called it temporal anchoring. He instructed her to focus on a single object, a falling leaf, a dripping faucet, anything, and imagine freezing it in place. At first, nothing happened. Frustrated, Michelle nearly gave up, but Walter encouraged her to keep trying. Finally, during one session, she managed to stop a raindrop mid-air, holding it suspended for a brief moment before it splashed onto the ground. The sensation was strange, like stretching a rubber band too far and feeling it snap back into place. Exhaustion washed over her immediately afterward, leaving her drained but exhilarated. Next came glimpses of possible futures. Walter warned her that this ability was unpredictable and often overwhelming. To practice, he asked her to close her eyes and concentrate on a specific question, such as, "What will happen if I step outside tomorrow?" Images flashed in her mind, blurry, fragmented scenes that made little sense at first. Over time, however, they grew clearer. She saw herself dodging a speeding car, avoiding a spill on the diner floor, even catching a dropped tray before it hit the ground. Each vision allowed her to prepare for events before they occurred, though Walter cautioned her not to rely on them too heavily. "Healing is the hardest," Walter admitted one evening as they sat together in the dimly lit warehouse. "It requires immense focus and energy, and even then you'll only be able to mend minor injuries." Michelle nodded, determined to master it despite the challenge. She practiced on small cuts and scrapes, both on herself and on Walter, who insisted he didn't mind being her guinea pig. The process was exhausting, leaving her hands trembling and her head pounding. But slowly she began to see results. A shallow gash on her forearm closed up within seconds, leaving only a faint scar behind. Though the effort left her physically weak, the sense of accomplishment was worth it. As Michelle honed her skills, the watchers began assigning her tasks. At first, they were simple observations, watching interactions between strangers, noting moments of compassion or conflict. One assignment involved sitting in a crowded bus station and paying attention to how people treated each other. Another required her to follow a young mother struggling to carry groceries while her toddler threw a tantrum. These exercises taught Michelle to notice details she might otherwise overlook, sharpening her awareness of human behavior. But soon, the assignments grew more challenging. The watchers tasked her with intervening in situations where people were on the brink of making destructive choices. During one mission, she encountered a teenage boy standing on the edge of a bridge, tears streaming down his face. Michelle approached cautiously, using her enhanced perception to gauge his emotions. When she spoke to him, her words carried a weight they hadn't before, resonating deeply enough to pull him back from the brink. Another time, she stopped a heated argument between co-workers from escalating into violence, her presence calming them in a way that defied logic. Each task pushed Michelle outside her comfort zone, forcing her to confront fears and doubts she'd buried long ago. Some nights she lay awake replaying the day's events in her mind, wondering if she'd done the right thing. Other times she questioned whether she was truly helping or simply delaying inevitable consequences. Yet through it all, Walter remained steadfast, offering guidance and reassurance whenever she needed it. Her relationships with friends and coworkers began to change as well. Jamal noticed that Michelle seemed distracted lately, her thoughts often elsewhere. "You okay, sis?" he asked one evening over dinner. "You've been acting weird." "I'm fine," Michelle replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess?" Jamal frowned but didn't press the issue. Meanwhile, her coworkers at the diner commented on her increasingly erratic behavior. Sometimes she'd disappear for hours without explanation, claiming she needed fresh air. Other times, she'd arrive looking pale and worn out, as though she hadn't slept in days. Greg, the manager, started giving her concerned looks but didn't say anything, perhaps assuming she was dealing with personal issues. Despite the challenges, Michelle refused to give up. She knew the stakes were higher than ever, not just for herself, but for everyone connected to her. Every decision she made, every action she took, rippled across dimensions in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. The responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders, but it also gave her a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something bigger than her daily struggles. One evening, as Michelle walked home from the diner, she paused beneath the clock tower and looked up at its towering silhouette against the night sky. So much had changed since the night she'd met Walter. Back then, she'd been just another waitress working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Now she was a bridge between worlds, entrusted with a mission she barely understood yet couldn't ignore. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above her, carrying with it a faint hum, the same buzzing sound she'd heard during her first encounter with the Watchers. Michelle smiled faintly, recognizing it as a sign that they were watching over her. Whether out of curiosity, admiration, or something else entirely, their presence reminded her that she wasn't alone. Taking a deep breath, Michelle continued walking, her steps steady and resolute. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready, or at least, as ready as she could be. Life as she knew it had changed forever, but instead of fearing the unknown, she chose to embrace it. After all, she thought, maybe the ordinary life she'd once clung to wasn't so ordinary anymore. Michelle's days became a blur of routine and chaos. On the surface, her life looked the same. She worked at Joe's diner, helped Jamal with his homework, and tried to keep up appearances for those around her. But beneath the calm exterior, she was caught in a whirlwind of extraordinary events. The Watcher's assignments grew more demanding, pushing her abilities to their limits and testing her resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. One evening, after closing up the diner, Michelle received an unexpected message from the Watchers. It came not as a vision or a voice in her mind, but as a vivid dream that felt far too real to dismiss. In the dream, she stood in a barren landscape under a blood-red sky. The air crackled with energy, and shadows moved unnaturally in the distance. A Watcher appeared before her, its glowing eyes piercing through the haze. "A conflict brews," it said, its voice resonating like thunder. "Forces beyond your understanding threaten balance across dimensions. You must act." "What kind of conflict?" Michelle asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. "War looms between factions of our kind," the Watcher replied. "Their struggle risks spilling into your world, bringing destruction in its wake. Your compassion may yet guide them to peace." Before Michelle could ask more questions, the dream dissolved, leaving her gasping awake in her bed. Her heart raced as she sat up, sweat dampening her forehead. She knew better than to dismiss the message. It was too vivid, too urgent to ignore. Whatever was coming, it was serious. The next day, Walter met her at their usual spot in the park. When she told him about the dream, his expression darkened. "This isn't good," he muttered. "If the Watchers are divided, it means they're losing control. And if they lose control, they could destroy everything," Michelle finished, her stomach sinking. Walter nodded grimly. "Yes, including your world." "So what do I do?" Michelle asked, her voice rising with panic. "How am I supposed to stop a war between whatever they are?" "You don't stop it directly," Walter explained. "Your role is to mediate, to remind them of the value of harmony. They respect humanity's capacity for empathy and compromise. If you can appeal to that side of them, you might be able to broker peace." Michelle stared at him, incredulous. "You're saying I have to walk into some interdimensional battlefield and play peacemaker? Are you kidding me?" "It won't be easy," Walter admitted, "but you've proven yourself capable so far. Trust your instincts and use what you've learned. That's all you can do." Over the next few days, Michelle prepared as best she could. Walter taught her advanced techniques to strengthen her abilities, focusing on endurance and precision. He showed her how to create protective barriers around herself using temporal energy, shielding her from harm in dangerous situations. They practiced until Michelle collapsed from exhaustion, only to get up and try again the next day. Finally, the moment arrived. One night, as Michelle lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the familiar buzzing sound filled the room. Shadows twisted and stretched unnaturally, forming a swirling portal in the corner. Without hesitation, Michelle stepped through, her heart pounding as the world around her shifted and transformed. She emerged in a surreal landscape, a mix of dimensions colliding into one chaotic plane. The ground shimmered like liquid glass, and towering structures floated in midair, defying gravity. Watchers moved everywhere, their forms flickering between solid and translucent. Some glowed with warm, comforting light, while others radiated cold, harsh energy. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm, A group of watchers approached her, their movements deliberate. One of them spoke telepathically, its voice echoing in her mind. "You have come. Why?" "I'm here to help," Michelle said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I know there's conflict among you, and I want to understand why." The watchers exchanged silent glances, as if communicating without words. Finally, another spoke. "Our kind disagrees on how to observe your world. Some believe intervention is necessary. Others argue it disrupts balance. Neither side will yield." Michelle took a deep breath, remembering Walter's advice. "I understand your concerns," she began. "But think about what drew you to humanity in the first place. Our ability to connect, to find solutions even when we disagree. Isn't that worth preserving?" The watchers hesitated, their glowing eyes dimming slightly. Sensing an opening, Michelle pressed on. "You don't have to choose sides. Instead, focus on what unites you, the shared goal of learning from us. If you work together, you can achieve that without destroying each other, or my world, or see." A long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then slowly, the watchers began to retreat, their forms fading back into the shadows. The oppressive tension eased, replaced by a sense of cautious calm. Michelle exhaled deeply, realizing she'd succeeded, but just barely. As the landscape around her dissolved, she found herself back in her bedroom, the portal closing behind her. Exhaustion hit her like a wave, and she collapsed onto her bed, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. All she knew was that she'd done something incredible, and survived. In the days that followed, Michelle returned to her normal life, though nothing felt quite the same. Her coworkers noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed quieter, more introspective, as if carrying a secret weight. Jamal asked her repeatedly if she was okay, but Michelle brushed him off, saying she was just tired. Despite the toll it took on her physically and emotionally, Michelle couldn't deny the sense of fulfillment she felt. For the first time, she understood why Walter had chosen her. That small act of kindness months ago had set her on a path she never could have imagined. Though her journey was far from over, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. Late one night, as she walked home from the diner, Michelle paused beneath the clock tower once again. The hum of the watcher's presence lingered faintly in the air, a reminder of the bond she now shared with them. She smiled softly to herself, knowing she'd found her true purpose not as a waitress but as a guardian of balance, a bridge between worlds. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Michelle Carter was no longer afraid. She had faced the impossible and emerged stronger for it. And she knew deep down that she would continue to make a difference, one act of kindness at a time. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy for Michelle, though the word normal no longer meant what it once did. She still worked at Joe's diner, still helped Jamal with his studies, and still greeted customers with her warm smile. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. The watchers remained a constant presence in her life, their hum faint but ever present in the corners of her mind. They didn't contact her as often now, seeming content to let her live her days while keeping an eye on her progress. Walter continued to guide her, though their meetings became less frequent. He assured her that she was ready to handle whatever challenges might come her way. One crisp morning, as Michelle unlocked the diner's door and flipped on the lights, she felt a strange sensation wash over her. It wasn't unpleasant, just different, like the air itself had shifted slightly, carrying a new kind of energy. She shrugged it off, assuming it was just another side effect of her growing connection to the watchers. But as the day went on, she noticed something unusual. People seemed more open, kinder somehow. A man who usually snapped at her for being slow thanked her sincerely when she brought him his coffee. A child spilled milk all over the counter, and instead of scolding her, her mother laughed and cleaned it up without complaint. Even Greg, the gruff manager who rarely cracked a smile, complimented Michelle on her efficiency during the lunch rush. At first, Michelle thought it was coincidence, a string of good moods among the customers. But by evening, she couldn't ignore the pattern any longer. Something was influencing the people around her, making them act with more patience and understanding. than usual. She wondered if the watchers were responsible, perhaps testing her indirectly or observing how she handled the shift in behavior. That night, as she closed up the diner, the buzzing sound returned. Stronger this time. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corner of the room, forming a portal similar to the one she'd stepped through before. Michelle hesitated only briefly before walking toward it. She knew better than to resist. They wouldn't summon her unless it was important. When she emerged on the other side, she found herself standing in a vast expanse of shimmering light. The ground beneath her feet felt solid yet ethereal, like walking on water frozen in place. Dozens of watchers surrounded her, their glowing forms flickering softly in the radiant glow. For the first time, they didn't seem distant or unreadable. There was warmth in their presence, a sense of gratitude that made Michelle's chest swell with emotion. One of them stepped forward, its voice resonating gently in her mind. "You have done well, Michelle Carter." I don't know what. You mean?" Michelle stammered, unsure how to respond. "Your actions have restored balance where it was lost," the watcher continued. "The conflict among us has ended because of your intervention. You reminded us of what truly matters, the value of harmony and coexistence." Michelle blinked, overwhelmed. "I didn't do much, I just talked to you, shared my thoughts, and that was enough," the watcher replied. "Your compassion and courage inspired us to find common ground. Such qualities are rare, even among beings like ourselves." A wave of pride mixed with humility washed over Michelle. She hadn't expected recognition or reward for what she'd done. Helping others, whether human or otherwise, had always been its own reward. Still, hearing the watchers acknowledge her efforts filled her with a quiet joy. "What happens now?" she asked after a moment. "Am I done? Is my part over?" The watchers exchanged silent glances before turning back to her. "Your role is not finished," one of them said. "You have proven yourself capable of bridging worlds, of fostering understanding where none existed before. We offer you a choice. Return to your ordinary life, free of our interference, or accept a permanent link to our realm. With this link, you will continue serving as a guardian for humanity, helping us navigate complexities we cannot grasp alone." Michelle's heart raced. The idea of returning to her old life was tempting. She missed the simplicity of not having to worry about interdimensional conflicts or the weight of responsibility resting on her shoulders. But deep down, she knew she couldn't turn away from what she'd become. A bridge between worlds, a force for good in ways she never imagined possible. "I'll stay," she said finally, her voice firm despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "If you think I can help, then I want to keep going." The watchers' forms brightened, their glow intensifying as if sharing her decision with each other. One of them extended a hand, or what passed for a hand, and touched her forehead lightly. A surge of energy coursed through Michelle, filling her with warmth and clarity. When the sensation faded, she felt stronger, more attuned to the world around her. Her abilities, already sharpened through practice, now felt limitless, as if she could shape reality itself with a single thought. "You are no longer merely human," the watcher said. "You are both observer and participant, bound to multiple realms yet belonging fully to none. Use your gifts wisely, Michelle Carter. The future depends on those like you." With that, the portal reopened, depositing Michelle back in the alley behind the diner. She stood there for a moment, taking in the cool night air and the distant hum of traffic. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. She glanced down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if testing their newfound strength. Then with a deep breath, she headed inside to finish closing up. The next morning, Michelle arrived at work as usual. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. She wore the same uniform, greeted customers with the same cheerful smile, and bussed tables with the same efficiency. But those who paid attention noticed subtle differences. She seemed calmer, more centered, as if she carried a secret that gave her peace. Her interactions with others carried a quiet confidence, a certainty that inspired trust. Jamal was the first to comment on the change. "Sis, you've been acting weird lately," he said one evening over dinner. but in a good way. You're happier, I think. Michelle smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately. Maybe I am. Maybe I've figured some things out. He frowned, clearly unsatisfied with her vague answer. Like what? Like how important it is to help people, she replied simply. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Jamal rolled his eyes but didn't press further. Over time, he noticed other changes too. Michelle spent less time stressing about money and more time focusing on hobbies she'd abandoned years ago. Painting, reading, even gardening. She encouraged him to pursue his dreams with renewed enthusiasm, telling him stories of people who had overcome incredible odds to achieve greatness. Though he didn't understand why she'd suddenly become so optimistic, he couldn't deny that her attitude was contagious. At the diner, Michelle's co-workers began to notice the shift as well. Greg stopped snapping at her for minor mistakes, instead offering praise when she went above and beyond. Regular customers started treating her differently too, engaging her in longer conversations and leaving generous tips. It was as if her presence radiated positivity, drawing kindness from everyone around her. But Michelle knew the truth. Her connection to the Watchers wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility. Every day she used her abilities to make small improvements in the lives of those around her. Sometimes it was as simple as preventing a spill or calming an argument. Other times it involved stepping in to stop someone from making a reckless decision. Each act, no matter how small, rippled across dimensions, reinforcing the fragile balance between worlds. Though her life appeared unchanged on the surface, Michelle knew she'd embarked on a journey few could comprehend. She was no longer just a waitress, or a sister, or a friend. She was a guardian, a bridge, a beacon of hope in a universe far larger and more complex than anyone realized. As she stood beneath the clock tower one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Michelle allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her ordinary life was gone, replaced by something extraordinary. Yet in many ways she felt more grounded than ever. She had found her purpose, not in escaping the struggles of everyday existence, but in embracing them, using her unique gifts to create a better world for everyone. The hum of the Watcher's presence lingered faintly in the air, a reminder that she was never truly alone. Michelle smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready. After all, she thought, every act of kindness creates a ripple, and she intended to keep making waves for as long as it took.